All right, a poll from United States. Most of Americans do think that in the next decade there are likely going to be another world war in some capacity. In the new polling by EU.gov, they were asked a question about the possibility of this war, the roles other countries can play, how United States should react to hypothetical nuclear attacks abroad or on their territory. 22% of Americans think that in the next 5 to 10 years there will be another world war. 29% think that it's probable. A third of Republicans think that it's rather probable that in the next decade we will have a global conflict, and 20% of independents and 16% of Democrats agree with this. If that happens, then 77% of Americans think that United States will be participating in it. Only 6% are saying that United States will not. 18% are not sure. 72% think that Russia will be involved in this war and likely on the other side. 69% also thinks the same thing about China. The countries that Americans think most likely will be involved in this conflict that would align with the United States is Great Britain, 67%, Ukraine, 58%, and Israel, 58%. And here, EU is somewhat missing. Perhaps that indicates that Americans are in their own agenda, and they maybe have forgotten that EU exists. Yeah, they don't think in the EU category. They think more in partner countries categories. Here, one should not be too concerned, I think. The main thing that they did name Ukraine as an ally. So the general perspective is estimated, I think, correctly. There likely will be a conflict with China, with Russia, Iran, and we understand our allies, Britain, Israel, Ukraine. Americans do not really pay much attention to EU. They understand that it exists, but does EU have military power? Does EU have a Ministry of Defense? No. Individual countries? Then we shouldn't be talking about EU. But it's a good estimate overall. It's rather realistic, and it shouldn't let politicians sleep through that conflict. When over 50% think that this conflict is inevitable, then the society does pay some attention to preparations, and it makes sense to be prepared at these times. Yeah, in their logic, I think they consider that EU is part of NATO and NATO is part of the United States. No, Nikolai, this is not their logic. That's not how they think. All right, Alexey, let's go to Ukrainian matters in this part. We have over 200,000 of military retirees below 60 years old. Their average age is 40, 45, 50 years old. And only 10,000 of them are still actively fighting in the ranks of armed forces. So Galina Tretyakova, the congresswoman, posted a question whether military retirees below 60 should be involved or should be forced to participate in the defense of the country. Should they withhold their pensions or exercise any levers on them to get them to participate? What is the right path in your opinion? Well, this is a difficult and complex question, Nikolai. The thing is that military retirees very often retire because of the state of their health. We have some issues with internet, Alexey. Perhaps you want to reload or something happened with your channel? Is it better now? Yeah, it is better. Sorry, that's hotel Wi-Fi. They sometimes slack a bit. So this is a complex problem. A lot of them, I do not have an exact number, but a lot of them have retired because of the state of their health, because military profession is pretty straightforward one. Every professional military over 35 years old can quite easily leave the armed forces due to the state of health, especially if they started at 18. So over 20 years, something might definitely happen with their health, and a lot of them back in the day before the war, before the hot phase of this war, they retired because of real issues. And another part of them is seriously concerned and upset about our government and governmental support, because many of them retired not in the best times, when the armed forces were shrinking, when their positions were cut, and a lot of them were facing a rather bitter proposition in terms of career. So they really have a dent on their armor about the government treatment. And the other question is, where would you put them? Because many of them are of the high rank. If they're colonels, lieutenant colonels, majors, where do you put them? You cannot send them to command platoons in the trench. So what could be done, I think, is to consider how else can we engage them without necessarily sending them to the front line. Perhaps suggest them some path, some position that affords for their experience to be used effectively. Because with these people, you cannot draft them by force. They're usually men of system, and they do have a lot of connections. And I would say that if they want to sabotage and break something, they can sabotage and break. They know how. You cannot force them to do what they do not want to do. And you cannot set them to command platoons in a trench. And to amplify that is, a lot of those whom they helped to grow while they were commanding officers are now generals in the Ukrainian army. So it would make sense to work with them properly. Then you could probably have drafted them, some of them, to our armed forces to provide valuable contribution. But our government often has a knack for treating its people in a rather upsetting manner. There are not too many cases like that, but the government machine definitely needs to be more delicate here, because the way they manage and handle them right now is definitely below the quality that is required. And these people, I think, in my opinion, do not find the right understanding and contact with current officers of our army, both from the officer side and the volunteer side of the army. So perhaps it's more individual approach, where you can ask them to come and help where they want to come and help. And some of them can be used as very high quality technical and military experts, especially if they're from engineering forces, right? Those can definitely help to service a ton of different pieces of equipment that we get from our allies and that need maintenance, as well as our own. So some of them can be drafted or invited to provide training for our new conscripts. Others perhaps can be engaged in restoring of a system of military justice. So probably not too many of them, but there definitely is a layer that can be engaged in this. Others can, for example, be formed into traveling training schools. For example, if we create schools within our brigades and continue doing training closer to the front, this way they don't need to be in the trenches, but they can still be within 50 kilometers from the front line, and they can continue bettering the skills and knowledge of our sergeants and younger commanding personnel, as well as the soldiers as well. So this is what I think, how I think they could be utilized. But these people are part of a system, and they are very well aware about their capabilities according to the laws that they learned back then, and in their view, they know it all way better than the little ones, as they call them, the younglings that are currently commanding armed forces. So that's as if you bring world champions to play for your second-tier soccer team, right? World champions of the yesteryear, but still, they were pretty good. So that's kind of the comparison. And our problem is, I think, is not that. I think our problem is that we're still failing to adopt the proper regulations, the proper bill for the good drafting system. And right now, for example, our drafting services doesn't even have the right specialists who can talk to these 55-year-old colonels in retirement. That's why I would not expect too much from this resource, and however much our congressmen would be jumping and screaming, "Why are you there in retirement and not fighting?" I think I explained my position rather well. It's a very delicate proposition to bring them back to service. So, in your view, that question rearing its head in Congress, what is it because of? What is the factor for it? Well, Galina Tretyakova is a rather passionate person. I know her rather well. And somebody probably told her that we have 200,000 people, the rank of major and above, who are not engaged in the current war and are getting their pension, their retirement, and probably very emotionally said that they need to be somehow reprimanded for not participating. So, yeah, maybe that. But can you name one country of the world where you can just draft the retirees so easily at your whim? It's not so easy. And even in the countries that are fighting in global wars, even that proposition still is somewhat delicate. And the person talking to them can give them should be able to give them a lot of assurances, to satisfy their conditions. Otherwise, without any guarantees, the person just would not join, would not go. And here I think we can remember the rail cart of Bonch-Bruevich. Do you know that story? No, not really. Well, Bonch-Bruevich family were great people. One of them was, I think, number 4 in the Bolshevik party in 1917s. And the other was the head coordinator of all special services in the Russian Empire back in the day, at that time. So when revolutionary times happened and Bolsheviks with some part of the military toppled the Tsar, then there were basically 2 revolutions, one after another. Without going into details, there was a rail cart of Bonch-Bruevich. And he was sitting there and talking to imperial officers. People were trusting him, he had good reputation, and he was inviting old specialists to this wagon. And basically he was helping some of them to leave the country if they want to, or at least advised to not fight back during the Soviet rule. But those who could and wanted to, he aided them to join the Bolshevik side in the right rank in the military. So he was already for about 20 years with Bolsheviks by that time, and they trusted him enough, so they gave him enough rights to promise and to position people in the right places in the budding Bolshevik army. And you can read some of the Pikul's historic literature, how the special services were prepared in the imperial times. It was very special training. And the result of Bonch-Bruevich's conversation was basically that during the revolutionary times when the White Army was fighting the Red Army had about 600 high-ranking officers of Imperial Army, while the White Army fighting them had only about 300, so half of that. And that's a similar situation with our specialists too. They are looking now at the drafting committees, like in that anecdote, oh, look at him, he's even talking. So we need to find the right people to communicate with them. If I had this authority, I would, I think, be able to convince quite a few. And there may be a select number of specialists who can do that. You cannot do it ballpark, you cannot do it en masse. It's a very individual approach every time. And, when people are upset that we cannot effectively use random fella that we got off the street, and now we are concerned that we cannot use a 58-year-old colonel to serve a young Ukrainian republic in this comparison. This is not the right approach. This is not how you do that. With the current approach, I don't think they can solve this. They can recruit them, they can draft them by force, but then do you put them where? To command a small platoon or company? Well, they know how to do Italian boycott. They'll just, without real revolting, they'll break the system. You cannot force them to do things. You cannot tell them when to go fight. And this is individual work, which our system, I don't think, is capable of carrying out at this moment. All right, very simply, and so that everybody can understand a simple question. Why, Colonel, cannot be put in charge of platoon out on the front line? Well, first of all, Nikolai, our law does not allow that, because according to our military law, we have to use our special military specialist, first of all, according to his specialty, and second, in accordance with his rank. It is very difficult to put the person in a high rank to command in the trench. In 2014, there were some examples, but just a couple, right? There was one general who said, yeah, put me in the trench and I'll command there. But that's a volunteer approach, and it's prohibited for the system to use it like this. So if somebody will force them to do it, they'll be breaking the law en masse. And at first you need to change the law if you want to do that. But if you do change the law, then what the current lieutenants and officers and colonels start thinking, they'll think that, well, okay, I'll be working for this army for the next 30 years, risking my health. So at the end of my career, they would draft me out of retirement and put me to command a platoon. This is the best way to demotivate the whole officers' corps and to cancel the whole idea of a military career, essentially. Because, yeah, you can take your professor and put maybe him as a technician in a laboratory, maybe once, maybe twice. But if you continue doing that as a system, all your brains will leave. They will not want to work with you. So that's why I'm thinking it's not real. What do you think about an idea to implement engineering command under a president of Ukraine? So a special body where all know-how and technical innovations data would be flowing into, so that they could think about countermeasures and best ways to counter current threats. Nikolai, we have 1 million of already existing bodies that can work with this. You just need to force them to work. You just need to audit them and to see which of them doubles the functions of the other. For example, do you know how many anti-terrorist bodies are there in Ukraine? No, I don't. 6, right? So in that hustle, it's probably proper to check who's doing what and maybe cancel the ones that they don't, that duplicate the efforts of the others. In case of fighting terrorism, for example, you have to be a very high-level expert, because you need to be gathering all kinds of data and getting all the little markers and bells listened to so you can understand what's happening. And when you have 6 bodies in charge of super secret operations, then guess how much leaks will you get out of that system? That's why there definitely are already bodies within our system that should be able to analyze the situation on the front, to make the proper deductions. And even the head of the battalion intel writes his reports daily, pretty much. So there's a lot of data coming, and there are already bodies within the army that can analyze that. And even these reports also contain prognostication element in regards to the next day or perhaps even week. So you just need the right people in Central Command who understand how to work with this information. And now a scary question. Do you think there are independent specialists close to President who can properly gauge this data input? Not the acting ones, not the ones already there, but independent ones. That is what used to be called representative of Central Command in a certain department. Somebody who is keenly aware of the circumstance on the front, who has a chance to get information directly from the front line if needed, who can talk to soldiers and officers, who can report back to the president to influence decisions made by the head of command. So that system needs to be working properly, and you cannot buy it in store. You need to train them. And those who were there, they were pushed out. So right now that system doesn't quite work. That's why I'm saying, well, now go do it the way you want to do it, dear Central Command. We are interested in them winning, of course, this war for us, but yeah. Do you know, by the way, when Central Command was formally established? Yeah, sure. I will tell after the war. By the way, you can Google it up. It's in the open sources. And just think between the 24th of February and the day when it was established, and calculate how much and how long did we fight without Central Command. Well, okay. curious. The next news is also about the law-making initiative of Galina Tretyakova, but now together with Mariana Bezuglaya, together they registered a bill project, 11104, that implies incarceration up to 15 years or life in prison with confiscation of property. And this is for appropriation of governmental functions. If people are representing Ukraine in times of war on international events in front of the high-ranking figures of foreign countries, including email, phone conversations, and other forms of communication without getting proper rank and authorization from the government in power. And some people are really concerned now and saying that it is probably about Alexey Arestovich, so he would not be traveling around and meeting people. But I think probably not you. Well, Nikolai, who? Me, Poroshenko, and Goncharenko? I think there are only really 3 people whom this bill can address, can be targeted at. And I don't know about them, but as for me, when I communicate with anybody outside of Ukraine, I always make all the right notes and saying that I'm here only in capacity of Alexey Arestovich as a physical person with my own opinion, and I do not represent any government and governmental body of Ukraine. And all the information that I'm sharing is my own personal opinion and my own information. So, yeah, this is an interesting bill. Speaking of our congressmen, they're lacking in adopting really needed bills, but they're very industrious in producing very fantastic bills. They're actually rather media people, so I guess we can ask them here, and you guys can reach out to them in the social and ask what exactly did they mean. Because that proposition of life in prison, right? Because if you kill somebody, if you premeditated murder, you get 25 years. But for this, you can get life in prison with confiscation of property. What's the goal of that bill? What's the zone and the area where that bill can be used? How many dozens of people try to, in their opinion, represent Ukraine across the border? Because I think it's literally Poroshenko, Goncharenko, and Arestovich, right? These are 3 people we know, Alexey. Maybe there are more. Right, I understand. The funniest part, okay, maybe if it's a couple dozen. But have you ever seen a bill that was adopted for only, 20 people? That would be a peculiar incident, right? So, another question. If these people try to represent Ukraine, then the next question is, where are they representing Ukraine? Are they doing it within the official legal bodies of other countries? Then diplomacy should be working there, right? Diplomacy should be there involved in saying this is the person representing our country, not that other one. This is the easiest way to solve. You just put the right message. Minister of Foreign Affairs can send a note and say to another country and say, hey, we know that you communicated with Arestovich, but he doesn't represent Ukraine. And if Minister of Foreign Affairs doesn't know whom Arestovich meets with, then they're not worth their pay. It is much easier to just send a note that this person has no legal authority. This is the person who does communicate with us through these channels, and if you're accepting Arestovich, communicate with him in a different capacity. You can also adopt another law. I suggest to our Congress that, those who talk to those people supposedly representing Ukraine should also go for life in prison. So then, you can arrest the whole Baltic Forum where Poroshenko and Arestovich and Goncharenko may be participants. Just come there and arrest everybody, right? So let's just escalate that a little. If I did not know these 2 congresswomen, but I did work with both of them in bilateral or trilateral committee before, so I will skip all my expletives about this initiative to not melt the mic. But honestly, the complexity of our position and Ukrainians as well at large, because in the first part of our program, we have to talk about the weird initiatives over in Russia, right? The forced ban on abortion, total, without any exceptions. They will probably soon adopt another bill about forced insemination. And we're then saying, well, great, that awesome that we are not as bad in Ukraine. But then in the second half of our stream, we find our Ukrainian initiatives. Let's prohibit Telegram Messenger. Let's punish people for life in prison if they speak to somebody about Ukraine. You know, they literally point a finger at us across the border and saying, hey, look at yourself. And it's difficult to object, because it actually would be nice to have some moral advantage over them, but our congressmen are not adopting the right things that we've been talking about day after day, stream after stream, for about 40 minutes each time, about life-dependent initiatives that need to be addressed. And yeah, they're still not there. Some of them adopted, but very few. Yet these idiotic initiatives do raise their heads. You know where it comes from? First of all, because of the lack of strategic vision, misunderstanding or lack of understanding how things work, lack of audit in the government system to understand how else this problem can be solved without any punishment. Because all these appeals to punish and to prosecute happen only because of government not being able to conduct its functions. Because if the government was capable, then we frankly already have a bunch of capabilities to carry things out. They could have been able to isolate those who do not represent Ukraine in a different fashion. In our constitution, it's written, who can speak on behalf of Ukraine? President, Prime Minister, Head of Congress. That's it. You can just send that document to all our partners and say, these are the only people whom you can talk to officially, in official capacity. Everybody else is, at your own pleasure. What else can we do? Oh yeah, they can, of course, implement the beheading initiative, right? If somebody represents Ukraine. Right, Alexey, let's go full-scale medieval. Well, that law basically underlines that our constitution is not working, that our Ministry of Foreign Affairs fails to inform our partners, perhaps, whom they should listen to in what capacity, right? So our government functions lack. And we're waving red flag to everybody saying we have ill-functioning government that is now switching to individual terror, and on the backdrop of Congress sitting over its limit, over its time term. Right? You can also bring up a different initiative to punish for life the congressmen who overstayed their welcome in Congress, and as a welcome initiative to the other one, and make it especially heavy crime because it's war times, right? Well, to be correct, actually, there are a lot of congressmen who actually want to resign from their positions, but they're not being let go. Do you think perhaps they have to conduct these idiotic initiatives so that the government would let them go? Well, yeah, exactly. They probably remember that if they vote for that at least once, they'll be remembered forever. And they'll have to face their people later, sometime maybe at a party or someplace in their family. Remember that law? Did you vote for that? And then, yeah, the whole evening turns into a fight at the bar. Yeah, so we've been going slowly drifting to the next topic about legitimacy. Goncharenko, that you mentioned, congressman, recently made a statement whether opposition have concerns about president's overstay after the end of his time frame. Goncharenko says that he is the opposition, and he has no questions about legitimacy of Zelensky. He will not have them on April 1st or on the 21st of May. Zelensky is a legitimate president of Ukraine, and all these talks are against the interests of our country. Whoever and however explains that, and anybody who would say that he is not entirely legitimate, that whether he has to give his authority to Congress or to somebody else, that person would either mean to be either a useful idiot or a direct Russian agent. So that fork that Congressman Goncharenko posted, do you think it's fair? That outlines once again, Nikolai, who are our congressmen, their quality. What does he mean says, right? If somebody talks about it, do we have not freedom of speech? A congressman who represents Ukraine here and there, who does who has very active life in social media, posts things. He's now talking about limiting the rights to speak. We can bring up the factor that about 70% of bills adopted by Congress do not go through the commission that, or trying to adopt by Congress, do not fail to pass the commission of Judicial Commission of Legitimacy. So, Constitution is the main law. The other laws cannot contradict it. Show me where in Constitution it is prohibited to express your opinion about legitimacy or illegitimacy of the current government. And that is a statement coming from a congressman. Is it from a congressman or a blogger who is just actively agitated about the matter? The second thing, he says he is in opposition, and the whole opposition have no questions. Did entire opposition have a Congress to appoint him in that capacity? I'm also in opposition, and I'm probably a more dangerous opposition because I'm ex-member of the current government. And opposition like me is probably usually stronger and more sour than the other kind. Did he ask my opinion? I can express it in a few minutes. And yeah, so the attempt to sit on several chairs usually ends up with a rather torn back. But the problem is that the actions of the current office in pro-government media, they often peddle the topic of creating a constitutional court to make sure that it will re-legitimize them for the next term. They are concerned. However, we close our eyes and ears, the current government indeed is concerned about its legitimacy. And it exists for one simple reason, that Constitution has certain lacunas there that allow different interpretations. And that's why Constitutional Court cannot resolve that. And frankly, after their decision, if they carry out a decision, anybody can make their statement too. But until Constitutional Court even tries to address the issue, the problem will exist. And it will remain one of the most serious political factors, starting the 1st of April and exacerbating on the 22nd of May. So I don't think we have a route how to deal with it. I have my own opinion. Ukraine should be able to talk about anything. Our citizens should be able to speak about anything. And if you want to put this matter to rest, use the Constitutional Court to at least put a band-aid on this matter. But do not knowingly use systemic efforts to remove Zelensky from power, peddling the system of illegitimacy. And that should be the message. Because, yes, it is war. It is difficult for us to carry out current election cycle. And it is wrong to prohibit people to discuss that, because then everybody becomes a Russian agent, right? Then the first Russian agents are in the office of the president who are talking about that they need a special decision by Constitutional Court. These are the Russian agents, right, raising this question. Perhaps, right, this is the satire here, but perhaps that's where they have entrenched. It's a cunning plan that you have, Alexey. Okay, let's remind our audience that we do support Armed Forces of Ukraine, besides just having these awesome streams. We have a link under this video. The actual link is under the Russian language video of Alexey that he posts on his channel. You can find it in the description to our translation. So yeah, dear audience, we do have a contact from Konstantinovka, volunteers from there. They requested some help because they are traveling to the towns next to the front line, and they gather funds and other means to help families with kids that are still there in that zone. And we donate money ourselves, but you know, there are more people who can contribute at large, because some people don't want to donate money to war, but perhaps they can donate money to help children who are sitting in the border towns that are being bombed regularly. And very often these kids are not with parents, but from orphanages, who already have difficult lives, but when they are that close to the front line, you can only imagine. So today's fundraiser is for children of those orphanages. So those of you who want to help kids to not donate money to war, you can do that today. We'll be very thankful, and how the kids will be thankful. We actually will post a video on our channel. They promised to send us a couple things. So you gotta have a heart, because these kids are so young and they do need help. So this is the group of volunteers that we're helping to get the funding today. And there are two links today under the stream. One of them is for that volunteer group that helps children. The other one is a fundraiser for a vehicle for a different military detachment. And you've been donating as we've been doing the stream. I can see there is a little bit left, so perhaps when you go there, there already will be closed. If that happens, we'll put a different fundraiser under the stream. All right, I have one more news about Ukraine. There was a big statement of the new commander of ground forces, Pavlyuk. In Facebook, he made a statement. It's a rather big one, but if you read it in depth, he is asking so that we, before starting to talk about another episode of rights violation of one or another conscript and about a difficult destiny of poor deserters, one should ask oneself, whom does it help to win the war when you bring these elements up? Definitely not Ukraine. So that's the statement made by Pavlyuk. In brief, I think you read it. I won't go into more details, but what can you say? What is right in there? What is wrong in there? Well, you know, my opinion, I expressed it before and I'll do it again. It is a wrong message from the get-go. And we're involved in a wrong process. Military should not be involved in conscription. This should be carried out by the government. This is already regulated by the law, and it is defined by the law that president determines the order of mobilization and local authorities provide the whole mobilization effort. Military can train and they can use it, but it is not their responsibility to gather the draftees and to find people, because all of the other executive organs avoided that task, and now military have to do it on their own. And in a very short term, we basically turned our military from a figure of honor, a figure of light and defense. We turned them into a horrible creature who will be drafting your relatives left and right. So we discredited the whole idea of draft. And that happened not because military are doing it wrong. They're conducting the function that is not even theirs. And now the question to military. Why did you agree to do that? Why the heck did you take it upon yourself? So that citizens are now in their building chats are discussing that you are getting people here or in the next building. You should bring up the documents to the commander-in-chief and indicate that, listen, these are not our functions and this causes certain consequences. The army faces more corruption. Our drafting organs start to buy villas in Spain because of people trying to avoid the draft. We should not be doing it. It is not our function. And, you know, the civilian looking at all that can say, you know, go F yourselves. We don't need that. And when you have a different system that actually implies that if you go to serve, to honor your duty to the country, you will get a roster of benefits in perpetuity. And when benefits outweigh the punishment, that is a whole different story. When it should be local authorities drafting people, not military. So then local authorities, first of all, they know their people. Second, there should be enough benefits coming for people who actually do risk their lives and go to the front. A smart country, smart government would have built that system so that your military does not get dirty in that whole messy process. Otherwise, we have commanders making this post saying basically, sorry, please do not hate us, we love you, we need your help, and you somehow run away from us, and in the meantime we set unreal mobilization plan, and then we scold our citizens for it, then we try to prosecute the corruption to try to rectify that. And then we appeal again to our citizens, somewhere in between of cursing that they need to go and fulfill their duty. So we're stuck somewhere between one and the other. Instead of, guys, this is not our function. Go carry out on your own. We can't do it anymore. Or perhaps, again, congressman, attention here. Let's change the law about mobilization. Let's review everything there. And if you want to do that, we can, of course, put the rights on the army, on the military to draft their own people. But then you have to give them enough tools to do that. And you may have certain consequences if you do so. So congressmen also, I think, are a bit puzzled here. On one side, they are too pretty. On the other side, they're too smart, and they want to be both sides. So it's a bit difficult, in their view, to enlarge the responsibilities and the capabilities of the military drafting commissions. So they're kind of staying away from it, and in the meantime, military takes all the blame and all the punishment and all the screaming. So I'm waiting till we have enough wise generals in the military who would actually be honest enough to show politicians the exact articles in the laws of Ukraine, that military does not have to mobilize anyone. That will be an interesting discovery, right, for the congressman. Because, you know, one can say that it's easier to be brave on the front than to be brave when facing civilian processes. At least speaking about generals. Generals are easier to show their bravery on the front, but they're very reluctant to be just as brave on the civilian side of things when they need to stand up in front of Congress and say, hey, this is not our responsibility, that makes a situation so much dire for the military, you guys need to review that. Somehow they haven't found it in themselves to address the Congress this way. Or at least, you know, to come out and say, yeah, you can change the law and give us all the responsibilities and authorities to do that, right? In Ukraine, in my thinking, the way it should be is that if military caught you drafting you at the street, you basically take that military representative, bring them to investigation committee and start criminal proceedings against them because they're fulfilling duties that are not their duties. They're violating the current law. And you should probably bring a lot of questions to court based on that, if we had real rights of citizens protected in this country. But unfortunately, somebody is really afraid of doing it because probably understands that it's a difficult proposition to continue any political career and even civilian career after that. So they're sending military and army to the draft process. All these letters, all these asks on Facebook and other social and publications will not be of much help. Because if you're violating the law together with all your military political leadership, and then come out and apologize, that's not a good practice. Why do you appeal to your citizens when you're violating all that, right? Your citizens can ask you the same question. A person can say, I'm just out here buying bread that my wife asked me to buy. And you are part of that big system that you're saying about saving Ukrainian nation and the country. Why haven't you thought it out properly? Why are you violating your own laws? Just by the fact that you're mobilizing, the fact that military is involved in mobilization, you're violating the mobilization law. So what do you want from me? Why should I be showing up and following the law because I have to, but you don't? And that's the simple discussion on these topics. All right, that's important. Thank you, Alexey. This is a very good notion. I think we're repeating it again. We have talked about that previously, but I think we should be still imprinting that, trying to imprint that in the minds of our authorities, because we're not the ones inventing this information situations, this news and reasons for us to bring it up. Once again, I'll say that it would be very important that people who make decisions in this country to finally start considering these difficult problems that need proper solving. And perhaps we should consider getting more people. For example, if you want to really draft more people to inspire them, bring up those who volunteered, bring up those who are fighting on the front, not those who were captured on the street, but those who actually are fighting on the front because they wanted to. And we have a ton of those too. We need to give more voice to them too, so it probably should inspire the others who are still hesitant. That's outside of addressing it on the legal field. Thank you, Alexey Nikolaevich, so much. Thank you for that stream. Do not forget to support us, our work. If you do like our work, please support the volunteers, the armed forces of Ukraine. Support us by clicking the like button and subscribing to the channels. If you're listening that in English, do that for the privateer station. We really appreciate your help, and we do need it to make sure more eyeballs get on this material. Just subscribe to Alexey Arestovich, to Alpha Media, and to the privateer station. We do appreciate that. With this is the end of that stream. See you next week. Thanks again. Have a good night.